There is a specific kind of confusion that only manipulative people can produce in you. Not anger. Anger is clean. Anger knows exactly what it's responding to. This is different. This is the feeling of walking away from a conversation and not being entirely sure what just happened. You know something felt wrong. You know you agreed to something you didn't want to agree to, or apologized for something that wasn't your fault, or ended up comforting the very person who hurt you. But if someone asked you to explain it, to lay out step by step exactly how you got from where you started to where you ended up, you would struggle to find the words. That struggle is not a flaw in you. That struggle is the entire design. Manipulation at its core is not really about what someone says to you. It is about what they get you to do to yourself. The self-doubt you supply, the guilt you manufacture, the confusion you mistake for your own faulty perception. A skilled manipulator does not need to overpower you. They only need you to override yourself. The Stoics understood this with a precision that still holds up 2,000 years later, not because they had a name for narcissism or gaslighting or love bombing. They didn't need one. They understood something more fundamental, that manipulation only works on a mind that has not yet learned to guard the one thing no outside person can ever legally, physically, or psychologically own: your judgment. Today, we are going to walk through 5 principles the Stoics built. 5 things that, once you understand them completely, make you significantly harder to manipulate. Not because you become suspicious of everyone, but because you become impossible to move without your own consent. 5 principles, 5 stories. And by the end, you will understand something most people never learn, that the goal is not to become someone who never gets targeted. Manipulators will always exist. The goal is to become someone their tools simply stop working on. Before we start, if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you lost an argument you didn't know you were having, you're exactly who this video is for. Stay to the end, and if it's useful to you, consider subscribing. This channel exists for exactly these moments. Before we get into the 5 principles, I need to say something that might sting a little, because almost nobody says it directly. Manipulation requires a partner, not a willing one, not a foolish one, but a partner nonetheless, because manipulation is not force. It cannot drag you anywhere against your will the way a fist can. It has to persuade some part of you to walk there voluntarily. That is not your fault. Let me be very clear about that before we go any further. The manipulator built the trap. They studied where you were vulnerable, your guilt, your desire to be liked, your fear of conflict, your history of doubting yourself. And they engineered a situation designed specifically to exploit it. The responsibility for the manipulation belongs entirely to the manipulator. But here is the question the Stoics would ask. Not to shift blame, but to hand you back your power. What part of you did they need to borrow in order for this to work? Because if you can identify that part, the guilt reflex, the fear of disappointing people, the belief that conflict means catastrophe, you can begin, slowly and deliberately, to withdraw it from circulation. And a manipulator who cannot borrow anything from you is a manipulator with no tools left. Epictetus, who understood coercion more intimately than almost any philosopher who has ever lived, put the entire discipline into a single sentence: "No man can rob us of our will." He said this as a man who had been legally owned by another human being, who had experienced, directly and physically, exactly how far another person's power over him could reach. And even he insisted there was a line that power could never cross. Your assent, your agreement, the part of you that says yes. Manipulation is an attack on precisely that line. It tries to get your yes without your full awareness of having given it. Today's 5 principles are about learning to notice in real time the moment someone is reaching for your yes and reclaiming the right to decide, consciously, whether they get it. Let's begin. 1. The manipulator's first tool is your own guilt. Imagine a man named Gerald. He is 45 years old, a co-owner of a small marketing agency in Charlotte that he built over 12 years with a business partner named Victor. On paper, the partnership looks equal. In practice, it has never been. Victor has a particular gift, the ability to frame every disagreement as a referendum on Gerald's loyalty. When Gerald pushes back on a decision, Victor doesn't argue the merits. He says things like, "I thought we built this together, but I guess I'm on my own here," or, "After everything I've done for this company, I didn't expect this from you." When Gerald raises a legitimate concern about the business's finances, Victor gets quiet, wounded, and somehow makes Gerald feel like the villain of a story where he is, by any objective measure, the person asking a reasonable question. Gerald has spent 12 years apologizing his way out of disagreements he never should have had to apologize for. He has signed off on decisions he privately opposed. He has watched Victor take an outsized share of credit and an undersized share of blame, and every time Gerald has tried to address it directly, he has ended the conversation comforting Victor instead. It took Gerald over a decade to notice the pattern clearly enough to name it. Victor was not persuading him with better arguments. Victor was persuading him with guilt, manufacturing in every disagreement an emotional debt that only Gerald's compliance could repay. Now let's travel back roughly 2,000 years, to Rome, to the imperial court of Nero, a court built almost entirely out of exactly this kind of manufactured emotional debt. Seneca served there as an advisor and tutor to the young emperor, and he watched, at extraordinarily close range, how manipulation operated at the highest levels of power. Nero's own mother, Agrippina, had spent years cultivating her son's guilt as a political tool, reminding him constantly, in ways both spoken and unspoken, of everything she had sacrificed to place him on the throne, using that manufactured debt to extract obedience long after he had become emperor in his own right. The court around Nero learned the same trick and used it relentlessly. Flattery laced with implied obligation, loyalty tested through manufactured slights, favors offered specifically so they could later be called in. Seneca, who had to navigate that court daily without losing himself inside it, wrote something to his friend Lucilius that reads like a direct diagnosis of exactly what Gerald was experiencing 20 centuries later. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. He was not only talking about money, he was talking about the specific hunger for approval, for belonging, for being seen as the loyal one, that manipulators learn to identify and feed just enough to keep you reaching for more. And elsewhere, in a line that could have been written directly to Gerald, nothing is so much to be feared as a needy friend, except one who is needed and knows it. Victor knew exactly how needed he had made himself feel to Gerald, not because Gerald genuinely couldn't survive without him, but because Victor had spent 12 years manufacturing that impression, one guilt-laced conversation at a time. Gerald's turning point came when he finally separated two things he had spent a decade merging into one: the actual facts of a disagreement and the emotional weather Victor produced around it. The next time Victor said, "I guess I'm on my own here," Gerald didn't rush to soothe him. He simply said calmly, "I hear that you're frustrated. I still think we should look at the numbers before we decide." And he waited. Victor's guilt, unfed, had nowhere left to go. Here is the first principle. A manipulator's most reliable tool is not a lie. It is your own guilt, borrowed and redirected back at you until you can no longer tell the difference between their disappointment and your obligation. The moment you can name that borrowing while it's happening, "I hear that you're upset, and that does not automatically mean I did something wrong," the tool stops working. Not because the manipulator stops trying, because you stop supplying the raw material. 2. They will make you doubt what you saw with your own eyes. Now meet a woman named Renata. She is 38, a marketing director recently promoted at a mid-sized firm in Phoenix, and for the first 8 months in her new role, she reported to a regional VP named Colin who, by every account from her colleagues, was known for being brilliant, charming, and impossible to pin down. Renata's experience of Colin followed a very specific rhythm. In front of others, he was warm, complimentary, generous with praise. Alone with her, he was different, subtly critical, quick to reframe conversations they'd already had. Renata would leave a one-on-one meeting with a clear memory of what had been agreed, only to have Colin, days later, describe an entirely different version of events. "That's not what we discussed," he would say with total, unbothered confidence. "I think you're remembering it differently than it happened." At first, Renata assumed she was simply misremembering. She started taking meticulous notes, and what she discovered slowly and with a growing sense of vertigo was that her notes almost never matched Colin's retelling. Not because she was wrong, but because Colin was quietly, consistently rewriting the record every time it benefited him. The most disorienting part wasn't the rewriting itself, it was how confidently he did it. He never seemed to be lying exactly. He seemed genuinely, unnervingly certain that his version was the true one. And that certainty made Renata doubt her own perception more than any argument could have. Let's leave Phoenix behind for a moment and go back to a very different kind of household, the one Epictetus grew up inside, as the property of a man named Epaphroditus in 1st century Rome. A slave in that world did not simply lack freedom of movement. He lacked, in the eyes of everyone around him, the standing to have his account of events matter at all. If his master claimed something happened one way and Epictetus's own memory said otherwise, there was no court, no witness, no social structure anywhere in the Roman world that would side with the slave's version over the master's. Epictetus lived for decades inside a system explicitly built to make his perception of reality worth less than someone else's. And yet, what he built out of that experience was not despair. It was astonishingly the opposite, a fierce, closely guarded conviction that his internal judgment, whatever the world outside said about its worth, remained entirely his own. He wrote, "Man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them." Read carefully, that line contains something crucial for exactly what Renata was going through. Epictetus is not saying your perception is always correct. He is saying it belongs to you. That the power to examine, hold, and trust your own account of what happened is a power no outside person, however confident, however senior, however charming, gets to simply overwrite. Renata's solution did not come from confronting Colin directly, at least not at first. It came from something quieter. She began sending a short, neutral follow-up email after every one-on-one, just confirming what we discussed, X, Y, Z. Not as an accusation, but as an anchor. Something outside her own memory, time-stamped, that Colin's confident retellings would now have to contend with. The first time she referenced one of those emails in a meeting where Colin tried to rewrite an earlier agreement, something shifted, not dramatically, but visibly. He backed down quietly in front of 2 other colleagues. And Renata, for the first time in 8 months, felt the solid ground return under her own memory. Here is the second principle. A manipulator's second tool, after guilt, is your own certainty about what you experienced. When someone consistently, confidently insists your memory is wrong, the goal is rarely to win a single argument. The goal is to make you outsource your grip on reality to them permanently. Keep the record. Trust the account you can point to. Your perception does not need anyone else's ratification to remain valid. 3. The most dangerous manipulators are the charming ones. Imagine a man named Felix. He is 52 years old, recently divorced, and cautiously stepping back into dating for the first time in 23 years. 6 months in, he meets a woman who seems, in his own words, almost too good to be true. She is attentive in a way no one has been attentive to him in decades. She remembers small details from their conversations and brings them up weeks later. She tells him, within the first month, that she has never felt this understood by anyone. She is generous with praise, quick with affection, and seems to move the relationship forward at a pace that flatters Felix's sense that something rare is happening between them. It takes Felix nearly a year to notice the pattern underneath the warmth. The intensity of her attention is never constant. It arrives in waves, overwhelming closeness, followed by sudden, unexplained coolness, followed by an equally sudden return to the overwhelming closeness, always timed to land exactly when Felix has started to pull back or express a doubt. Each cycle leaves him more grateful for her attention than the last, because each cycle has taught him, without either of them ever discussing it directly, that her warmth is conditional, and that losing it feels far worse than any discomfort he might raise. This is what modern psychology calls love bombing. though Felix, going through it, has no name for it at all. He only knows that he feels increasingly like he is managing her moods rather than participating in a relationship. Now let's go back to Rome one more time, but to a much younger version of one of our most familiar figures. Before Marcus Aurelius became emperor, he was a teenager being groomed, quite literally, for the highest position in the known world. And people who are being groomed for power attract an enormous amount of charm. Marcus was surrounded from adolescence onward by men who complimented his intelligence, agreed with his opinions, and made him feel constantly extraordinarily understood. It would have been easy, expected even, for a young man in that position to mistake constant flattery for genuine connection. What saved Marcus, by his own account, was a teacher named Junius Rusticus, who did something almost nobody else in his life was willing to do. He told Marcus when he was wrong, not cruelly, not to diminish him, but plainly, consistently, without the performance of admiration that everyone else around the future emperor had learned to perform. Marcus wrote about Rusticus with a gratitude that stands out among his private journals, crediting him specifically with teaching him to read carefully and not be satisfied with a superficial understanding, including, crucially, a superficial understanding of the people closest to him. Elsewhere, reflecting on the general danger of flattery in his life, Marcus wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. The specific danger of a charming manipulator is that their warmth feels like the opposite of that warning. It feels like an advantage. It feels like being chosen, understood, finally seen." Marcus's discipline, learned from a teacher who refused to flatter him, was to hold even the most flattering attention up to the same scrutiny he applied to everything else. Does responding to this cost me my word, my judgment, my self-respect? Not does it feel good? Does it cost me something real? Felix's own turning point came slowly, through a friend who had known him for 20 years, and finally asked a simple question over dinner. Does it feel like a relationship, or does it feel like a project you're managing? Felix sat with that question for a long time before answering honestly. He began paying attention, after that, not to how intensely he was loved in any given week, but to how consistent that love actually was, whether it existed independent of his compliance, his gratitude, his careful management of her moods. What he found, once he started measuring consistency instead of intensity, was not much left standing. Here is the third principle. The most dangerous manipulators rarely arrive as villains. They arrive as the most flattering, attentive, understanding presence you have ever encountered. And the intensity of that attention is not evidence of its genuineness. Consistency is the evidence. Anyone can perform warmth for a season. Very few people can sustain it without a hidden cost attached. 4. When manipulation wears the mask of reasonableness. Now meet a woman named Cheryl. She is 61, recently retired from a long career in hospital administration and the primary caregiver, informally but almost totally, for her elderly mother, a role her two brothers have managed to avoid almost entirely for 6 years. The avoidance is not accidental. Both brothers are skilled at a very particular kind of manipulation, the kind that never sounds unreasonable in the moment. When Cheryl raises the imbalance directly, they don't get defensive or angry. They get logical. You're just better at this than we are. You live closer. It makes more sense. Mom prefers you handling it anyway. You know how she gets with change. Every sentence sounds on its own almost fair. Strung together over 6 years, they have constructed an entire arrangement in which Cheryl carries nearly all the weight, and any attempt she makes to redistribute it gets quietly, reasonably, talked back down to zero. The particular cruelty of this style of manipulation is that it leaves Cheryl with almost nothing to point to. No cruel words, no dramatic refusal, just an accumulating pile of calm, reasonable-sounding sentences that all happen to conclude every single time that Cheryl should keep doing what she has always done. Let's go back to the Roman Senate one final time, not to Cato this time, but to the broader machinery of political manipulation that men like Cato spent their careers resisting. Roman political life in the final decades of the Republic ran on precisely this kind of reasonable-sounding coercion. Bribery was rarely offered as bribery. It arrived dressed as friendship, as tradition, as the obvious and sensible thing any practical man would do. Pressure to vote a certain way rarely arrived as a threat. It arrived as a favor already extended, an obligation already implied, a reasonable expectation that a friend would naturally return a friend's generosity. Cato became famous and, to his enemies, infuriating, precisely because this machinery did not work on him. When offered arrangements that every reasonable Roman senator was expected to accept without complaint, Cato would simply decline, plainly, without the social panic that usually accompanied refusing an incredibly reasonable-sounding request. He was, by his contemporaries' own descriptions, almost impossible to talk into anything he had already decided against, not because he was rigid or unreasonable himself, but because he had learned to separate the reasonableness of someone's tone from the actual merits of what they were asking. The Stoic teaching underneath Cato's resistance comes through clearly in something Epictetus later taught his own students, in a line that speaks directly to Cheryl's situation. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Cheryl's brothers were skilled at making their requests sound reasonable. What they were never able to do once Cheryl started applying this discipline was make their requests match what she had already, clearly, decided about her own limits. Her shift did not come from a single confrontation. It came from Cheryl doing something she had never done in 6 years, writing down privately what an actually fair arrangement would look like before any conversation with her brothers began. Not what sounded reasonable in the moment, filtered through their calm, confident tone. What was actually fair decided in advance, on her own terms. The next time one of her brothers offered a reasonable-sounding excuse, Cheryl didn't argue with the excuse. She simply returned to her own predetermined standard. I understand that's easier for you. I need 1 weekend a month covered, starting next month. No debate about whose logic was more persuasive. Just a return to a decision already made, calmly restated, immune to the reasonableness of whatever came next. Here is the fourth principle. Some of the most effective manipulation never sounds unreasonable at all. It sounds calm, logical, even generous, right up until you notice that every reasonable-sounding sentence somehow concludes with you carrying the weight. The defense against this is not a better argument. It is deciding in advance and independent of their tone what you actually believe is fair, and returning to that standard, unmoved, no matter how reasonable the next sentence sounds. 5. Becoming someone manipulation doesn't work on. Finally, there is a woman named Adele. At 59, she runs a small non-profit in Minneapolis, and everything in this video has been building toward what her life looks like now. Not because manipulative people stopped appearing in it, but because something fundamental changed in how much traction they could get once they arrived. Adele was not always this way. In her 30s and 40s, by her own account, she was an unusually easy person to manipulate, not out of weakness, but out of an excess of the qualities that make someone genuinely good to be around. She was empathetic to a fault. She assumed good intentions by default. She believed deeply that most people were fundamentally reasonable, which made her slow, sometimes catastrophically slow, to recognize when someone wasn't. The change came gradually through exactly the kind of experiences we've walked through today. A business partner who weaponized her guilt, a supervisor who rewrote her memory of events, a partner whose warmth turned out to be a leash, a family arrangement disguised as reasonableness. Adele did not become cynical after all of it. She became something more useful. She became discerning. What people notice about Adele now is not suspicion. She remains, by every account, one of the more open and trusting people in most rooms she enters. What has changed is something quieter and far more structural. She has built, over decades, an internal reference point that does not move based on how someone else frames a situation. She listens to guilt without automatically obeying it. She holds her own memory of events with a quiet confidence that outside confidence, however forceful, cannot simply overwrite. She notices the difference between intensity and consistency. She decides in advance what she actually believes is fair, and she returns to that standard regardless of how reasonable the next argument sounds. Let's travel back one final time to the school Epictetus ran in his later years, in the small Greek town of Nicopolis, where he spent decades training students in exactly the discipline Adele eventually built for herself without ever having read a word he wrote. Epictetus's entire teaching method was built around a single relentless habit, training students to pause in the gap between an event and their reaction to it, and ask a simple question: what here is actually in my control? He taught them that other people's opinions, other people's tactics, other people's attempts to persuade, guilt, flatter, or pressure them were never, under any circumstances, within their control. What remained entirely theirs, the one territory manipulation could never fully occupy without their consent, was their judgment, their assent, their yes. He told his students, in words that describe precisely what Adele eventually became, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Applied to manipulation specifically, this becomes something like, the wise person does not grieve the approval a manipulator threatens to withhold. They rejoice in the judgment that manipulator can never touch. Adele's non-profit board, several years ago, brought on a new major donor, a wealthy, charismatic man who was used to getting his way through a familiar combination of charm, guilt, and reasonable-sounding pressure. Within months, he was attempting subtly to steer decisions that were not his to steer, framing every pushback from staff as ingratitude, every boundary as an insult to his generosity. Adele watched the pattern for exactly one board meeting before naming it calmly in a private conversation with him, not accusingly, just clearly. "I want to be direct with you because I think it's respectful to both of us. Your donation doesn't come with a vote on staffing decisions. I hope you'll stay involved, and I understand completely if this isn't the right fit." He left eventually in search of an organization more willing to be managed. The non-profit survived without his money. Adele survived, entirely intact, without his approval. Here is the fifth and final principle. The goal was never to become someone manipulators stop existing around. They will keep showing up in every form we've discussed today, and plenty we haven't. The goal is to become someone whose judgment is no longer available for borrowing. Someone who can feel the guilt, hear the confident rewriting, notice the flattery, recognize the reasonable-sounding pressure, and still, calmly, return to a standard that belongs entirely to them. That is not coldness. Adele is, by every account, warmer now than she has ever been, because warmth that isn't constantly being siphoned off by people exploiting it has far more left over for the people who actually deserve it. We began today with a specific kind of confusion, the disorientation of walking away from a conversation unsure how you ended up agreeing to something you never wanted, comforting someone who hurt you, or doubting a memory you were once completely sure of. And we walked through 5 principles, each one carried to us by people who faced manipulation at a scale most of us will thankfully never encounter. A court built on manufactured guilt, a household where one person's reality was legally worth more than another's, a young heir surrounded by professional flatterers, a senate that ran on reasonable-sounding coercion, and a school that spent decades training ordinary people to hold on to the one thing none of it could touch. Let's bring them together. The first principle, a manipulator's most reliable tool, is your own guilt, borrowed and redirected back at you. Stop supplying the raw material. The second principle, they will try to make you doubt what you saw with your own eyes. Keep the record. Trust the account you can point to. The third principle, the most dangerous manipulators arrive as the most charming people you've ever met. Measure consistency, not intensity. The fourth principle, some manipulation never sounds unreasonable at all. Decide in advance what you believe is fair and return to it no matter how reasonable the next sentence sounds. The fifth principle, the goal is not a world free of manipulative people. It is becoming someone whose judgment is no longer available for borrowing. Epictetus, writing from the vantage point of a man who had once owned nothing at all, not his body, not his freedom, not even, in the eyes of the law, his own account of his own life, left behind a single sentence that outlives every manipulator who will ever try their tools on you. No man can rob us of our will. They can lie to you, they can flatter you, they can rewrite the record and manufacture your guilt and dress their pressure up as reason. What they cannot do, what no manipulator in the history of the world has ever actually been able to do, is make the choice for you. That choice, and only that choice, was always yours. Guard it accordingly. If this video helped you see something more clearly, the most useful thing you can do is subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've lived through any of the 5 patterns we covered, tell us which one in the comments. It helps more people find exactly the video they need. Take care.